So we're going to begin now by talking about what is stress and anxiety and how can we work with it. So anxiety is the number one mental health issue. That's really why I wanted to focus on anxiety specifically today, because so many people suffer from anxiety. We see the statistics about 4% of the global population. The American Psychological Association has been surveying people starting in 2020 during the pandemic to look at what is the typical rate in the United States. And what they found was that over the past few years, the numbers have crept from about 1 in 4 people that suffer from anxiety to about 1 in 2, or about 50% of us at any given time have not just anxiety, but an anxiety disorder, which we'll talk about in a moment. So anxiety is a really pervasive, significant mental health challenge that most of us live with, but it also creates a lot of distress in our nervous system and how we feel about ourselves, how we feel in the workplace. When we wake up in the morning and when we go to bed at night, when we're anxious, we can really be suffering. So I want to really shine the light on some of the challenges around anxiety. So what is anxiety? We all know it, right? We've all felt it at different junctures of our life. Like our character here, wake me up in 30 years, right? The difference between having an anxious moment and having an anxiety disorder is the level of the anxiety and how much it impacts daily life. So many of us can be anxious a lot, but does it interfere with being able to do our job, being able to interact with people? Does it keep us inside the house rather than going out? Do we avoid certain things because we're worried that we're not going to perform well, right? So some of the key words to think about in this slide is excessive levels and impacting daily life, right? And that really is the continuum of mild kind of everyday anxiety to more significant anxiety. And, we really want to look at this, especially the impact it has on our functioning in the job, with our families, things that really matter to us, right? If we're anxious about something that doesn't matter that much, then it doesn't usually rise to that occasion. One of the most simple anxiety disorders is something called a simple phobia. And a simple phobia might be fear of mice, for example. That can be an anxiety disorder. But if you don't see mice a lot, it's not really a problem. I have a phobia about mice, by the way. So luckily I don't see mice that often. Once every couple of years do I have a little critter in my house. And so I'm not plagued by that, even though I do have a phobia. But if it's something like in the workplace, feeling anxious about, having a negative interaction with somebody and it's pervasive, that's when it becomes really difficult to manage. So anxiety has 2 main components. So number 1 is the physical components. And again, if you think back to how you feel when you're anxious, almost right away, you might even get a little hit in your body, a visceral feeling of that shortness of breath, muscle tension, headaches, sweaty palms, like that little fight or flight system, right? So that's the physical manifestation of anxiety. And then there's the other wing, which is the emotional part, the ruminating thoughts, nervousness, worry. And when we get to the extreme where we're talking about like panic attacks, we might add a fear that something is terribly wrong, that we're dying, right? That's the extreme on the continuum. Both the physical and the emotional aspects of anxiety can impact how well we're thinking, how well we make decisions, how we learn, how we focus and pay attention, and how we interact with people. So both parts can have a negative impact on our daily life. So I want to spend time thinking about how do we work with that, right? So if we know that there is an emotional component and a physical component, it makes sense when we start to think about ways to manage our stress in the workplace that we are looking at both of those wings. One of the criticisms psychotherapy sometimes has, and I've heard this from clients I've worked with, they'll say, I went to a cognitive behavioral therapist, I worked on my thoughts, and I'm still anxious. And that's part of the challenge. If we only tackle one end of the anxiety condition, we're going to still have feelings in our body, for example. Or if we only work with our bodies, we only do somatic resources, and we don't work with the thoughts, then they're going to creep back in. So when we think about a resource, I'd like to think about a 3-pronged approach to managing stress. One is somatic, which means body resources, resourcing in the body to help bring more relief to the nervous system. The second is emotion regulation. How do I manage emotions and so that I don't get overwhelmed or flooded? And the third is bringing compassion. And that is equally important to the other two areas, because compassion, being able to be kind to oneself in the middle of challenges, can help take down the intensity and help us feel not so alone and isolated. So we're going to spend a little time in all three of these. So first, I want to talk about mindfulness-based techniques for grounding. So grounding is a somatic resource. Jyoti was leading us early on, right before we started today, in a short grounding. She asked us to feel our feet on the floor. Anything that helps us to feel grounded and in our bodies can help us to get our thinking back online. So Janina Fisher, who's a wonderful psychologist, she talks about mindfulness in terms of calming the body, somatic resourcing, activating the frontal lobes, which is more cognitive, and then that can help us with our behavior. So again, that three-pronged approach: somatic, emotion regulation, cognitive, and then also the behavior. So many of you are familiar with, but it always helps to remind us, what is mindfulness, right? Because mindfulness is one of those somatic resources we can rely upon to help us come back into the present moment and to soothe our nervous system. So mindfulness, paying attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. And we'll do a brief practice in a moment to practice this. And also awareness. So mindfulness helps us to know that we're actually struggling. Many of us sort of operate on this daily level of tension. We call it like a threat system that's always active, and we don't even realize it. We're just trying to get through the day. When we slow down and actually notice that we're holding tension, that we're in a over-aroused nervous system state, that helps us to begin to resource. So mindfulness not only soothes our nervous system, but it brings awareness that we need to soothe our nervous system, right? All right, so what are ways that we can use grounding and stabilization with mindfulness? So it helps us, we can first of all establish safety in the body. If we're in a fight-flight system, we can't talk ourselves out of that. We need to feel and resource so that we can feel more soothed and stable for that moment. So we want to come back to our homeostasis, our state of regular being, right? And we can do that through the breath, the body, and also the senses. So a couple of ones, and this one always shows up because it's the easiest one to practice. And when I work with people that have anxiety struggles or stress-related anxiety, we like to figure out maybe 2 or 3 go-to strategies. So I'm going to give you a couple today that you can use when you need that stabilizing, grounding, and safety feeling in the body. So let's practice this together, okay? Very simple one. It has a little bit of mindfulness in it, but it also has a grounding somatic quality. So sitting up nice and tall, and you can relax the shoulders back and down, feeling your feet on the floor. Now, feeling your feet on the floor is a single small tip throughout the day. If you're sitting a lot, or if you're walking, to really feel these feet on the floor. That immediately takes the focus from the head in our cognitions into the body. So feeling the feet. So maybe wiggling the fingers and toes so we can feel both our hands and feet. Okay. So I'm going to invite you now just to press gently into your left foot and just feel all of the activation in your entire left leg. Just feel all the muscles engaged. Good. And feel the foot really pressing into the ground, and then release. And then we'll do the other side, pressing into the right foot and activating the whole right leg. And then release. And then taking a conscious breath. Noticing where you feel the breath. Let's do that again. Breathing in. And gently breathing out. So that's a somatic resource. Grounding, establishing connection with the physical body, and then using breath to begin to bring the body back into homeostasis.